Hello everyone, I'm Derek Wong from CUHKFAA Chanchanha Secondary School from Hong Kong. I'm glad to have the chance to present on the paper, Perceptions of Students on Online English Language Reading Assessments, a Preliminary Investigation. So here we go. I'll first start with an introduction of the HKDSE. So the HKDSE, or in full, the Hong Kong Diploma of Secondary Education, is Hong Kong's local university entrance examination. So this is administered typically at the end of a 3-year senior secondary education, but of course there may be repeaters, there may be people who want to take the examination on their own. But here we'll only be looking at secondary school students here. The results of the HKDSE will allow students to be admitted to local universities via the JUPAS system, which is the Joint University Programs Admission Scheme. The passing grade in the DSE would at least be a 3 in English, 3 in Chinese, 2 in mathematics, and an attained level in citizenship and social development. Prior to this current year, 2024, we had the liberal studies subject, which requires a level 2. So the levels here actually translate to a level 1 to level 5 double star scale, which is actually pretty similar to grade A in other examinations being converted to 5 double star. So A would be 5 double star, B would be 5 star, C would be 5, D would be 4, E would be 3, and so on. That is not a fair comparison, but at least 3 is seen as a pass for English. So, an introduction to the HKDSE English Language Examination. The English Language Examination in the HKDSE is split into 4 papers, including the reading, writing, listening, and speaking papers. The latest assessment framework actually mentions that the paper 1 reading carries 20% of the total marks, and it takes up 1.5 hours of examination time. The other papers are also on the slide. So the writing paper would take up 25%, the listening and integrated skills paper would take up 30%, speaking paper 10%, and one extra component called the school-based assessment, being a continuous assessment tool for a fairer judgment, 15%. For this research, we will only be looking into the reading paper. But before we look onto more details about the reading paper, let's first look at, very briefly, at the overall statistics published by the HKEAA, which is the Examinations Authority, Examinations and Assessments Authority, on overall statistics for the English language paper. As you can see here, the percentage of students or candidates who can get a 3 or above, which is the passing grade for English, is constantly at around 52 to 55%, the highest, whereas the people who get a 5 double star would be around 1%. U in this scale actually refers to unclassified papers. So for the English language paper, in 2023, the passing rate for English was 52.9%. The reading paper itself has multiple aims, but it technically talks about interpreting, understanding texts, and the main theme, key details, understanding contextual meaning, tone and mood. All this actually boils down to asking students to read 2 to 4 texts and answering various questions, which may include thematic, main idea, specific factual questions, vocabulary, reference, inference, higher order thinking, figurative language, views and attitudes, relationship between ideas questions. In other words, there is a huge need to brush up student skills, especially in terms of reading. The aim of undergoing this particular project is to find extra opportunities to train students' reading skills and provide targeted feedback and practice without adding too much on teachers' marking and administrative load. In other words, what we're trying to do here is to make use of existing e-platforms to provide reading practices, which also has an automated marking function. Of course, there are multiple concerns from this. The first concern would definitely be from the teacher's perspective, whether or not e-marking platforms are actually reliable. Are they accurate enough to replace us marking the papers? From the student's perspective, whether or not doing papers online is comparable or acceptable. So there are thoughts about efficiency, attitude, and effectiveness. For this paper, we will be looking into a pilot program that our school has collaborated with a local service provider on. This will be an e-version of a HKDSE English language examination, which has immediate marking functions. So students would do the paper in class using school-provided notebooks. Students also have the option to get a hard copy or printed copy of the reading passages. All other factors for the examination were kept constant. So these include the amount of time to complete the paper, the seating arrangement in the classroom, the teacher-student ratio, invigilating, and so on. After students complete the examination, students would immediately get results and also feedback on their platforms. The platform itself, I did not include it in these slides, but the platform itself actually includes two slides. So, two parts. On the left-hand side, you would see the passage, which allows students to scroll down, scroll through, scroll up and down. The right-hand side would be the questions. So they're all done online and marked online. After the whole assessment session, there will be a teacher who would do the debriefing of the students using the scores, feedback, and notes generated by the platform and by AI itself. In fact, all the long questions, in other words, questions that require more than 3 or 4 words. So some students might have to put in long sentences or even paragraphs to answer certain questions in the reading paper. And for those questions, they were actually marked by AI, given multiple prompts that were given to them beforehand. The general aim of this paper particularly looks into students' attitudes towards doing reading assessments online. So a class of 25 secondary 6 or grade 12, depending on your context, 25 students in a local Hong Kong co-educational secondary school were involved in this research. And what was the methodology was questionnaires and the teacher researchers' observation notes prior to and after administration of the reading assessment and feedback session. These are the general questions included in the questionnaire. So for the pre-assessment, for the pre-assessment questionnaire, students were asked whether or not they have done any tests online, what they thought were the benefits and drawbacks of doing tests online, and whether or not they actually prefer doing tests online, and reasons for that answer. For the post-assessment questionnaire, this follows up on the Likert scale question in the pre-assessment questionnaire. So the first question was a review about the experience. Second question was actually on whether or not they would prefer doing future tests online and follow-up reasons, as well as whether or not their opinion on online testing has changed. If we look at the results, on a scale of 1 to 5, do you prefer doing tests online in the pre-test? And on a scale of 1 to 5, do you prefer doing future tests online in the post-test? We do see a very interesting response. So these are recorded in the table on the slide right now. So in the pre-test, we would see that most students, or we would see a rather interesting normal curve as the results. So most students had their responses pretty much neutral, 60% of students answering 3. Then we have 3 and 2 respectively, 4 and 5, and 4 and 1 respectively for 2 and 3. But for the post-test, we do see a general tendency towards the higher preference side, with 5 students answering 5, 12 students answering 4. This already accounts to 68%. 3 students sticking with 3, 12%, and 1 or 4 students taking 2 and 1 respectively. Let's quickly analyze the results. These are some of the reviews that students wrote for their reasons. So there may be some grammatical errors because they are taken directly from the students' written feedback. So positive reviews include students not having to write with their hands. They could find keywords in the question easily. There was actually no control F function. There was no find function, search function though. They did not need to flip between papers. It was convenient. The predicted grade can be shown immediately afterwards. It was a whole new experience, and the feedback afterwards was clear. However, there are also some negative reviews of the experience, including how the platform might be inconvenient, how the passage might be small to read due to the small screen of the Chromebook, I assume. Um, it may also be better. Here, there was a suggestion if annotation on the passage was allowed. They might get tired looking at the screen for a long time. The exam itself was 1.5 hours, so technically it was non-stop, staring straight at a screen for that whole time period. It was also quite different from the normal approach, which was a negative review from a student. And there are also other technical issues about not typing as fast as writing by pen, I assume, as well as how the possibility of cheating. Just to look at the results a little bit, we do see a more skewed result in the post-assessment questionnaire. We see that responses tend towards the two extremes. Our interpretation is that students might have a strong interpretation of e-assessments, a strong impression of e-assessments, and have their own thoughts after trying it firsthand for the first time. Uh, of course, there's still a generally positive review on the experience. In fact, from the researcher's point of view, students were evidently surprised when they actually got the result immediately. So it was exactly the things that you would expect in a student. So they would be very surprised. They would start comparing their results with each other. They would look at their grades and see why they were that way. Took a look at the questions they got wrong. In other words, there were lots of evidence and opportunities for informal negotiation of meaning, and that was actually what we saw in the classroom. At the same time, there was a lot of peer-to-peer interaction even before the actual review session began. So this actually means something in terms of teaching, because this is actually rather unusual when it comes to paper-based examinations, when people might get their papers, might do their papers, wait for a long time before it's actually marked, and by the time they get their papers back, they might already have forgotten about the experience and the heat might have worn off. Then another thing that might have explained why there was a general positive review and experience was that there was a relatively successful post-assessment review session. The review session focused on students' strengths and weaknesses and actually had specific feedback tailored to the whole class. Now, there was also a class-based and individual-based report that was given to students afterwards, and that might have given rise to a positive review in overall, because these are feedback that is relatively not so common when it comes to doing paper-based assessments. At least paper-based assessments would not be marked that quickly. In conclusion, we do see a generally positive review on e-assessments, which does warrant future research. At the same time, there are a large number of possibilities in the future due to ever-increasing AI capabilities. So AI is currently developed in tracking performance and not analyzing performance. There might also be a high efficiency in marking after the answer-based or the current tools mature. In fact, even in the current pilot scheme with the experiment taking place, AI has already taken a huge role in marking these long answers. And was at a pretty high reliability. So there were very few student appeals, and even when we went through the answers, there was nothing that we had to change afterwards in terms of marks. However, the teacher's input and intervention is still needed in terms of management. It might still be different when students are doing an e-assessment on their own. Assessment conditions may be different. At the same time, the teacher might still be needed in terms of monitoring and troubleshooting and providing additional help when needed. Of course, this paper is prone to multiple sources of error. First, we only tried one e-assessment platform, and obviously this could not be generalized to show the entire picture. At the same time, hardware may be an issue. As you have seen in one of the responses, Chromebooks do have relatively small screens. So if they made use of other devices, would the results be different? This might be one source of error per se. At the same time, AI integration is still in its early stages. Human intervention and accuracy may be reduced in the near future. At the same time, the success of the pilot run, as I mentioned earlier, depends largely on the quality of post-assessment debriefing and reports. and this may differ from person to person, especially the debriefing section. And of course, this is just a one-time trial, so this might hide other benefits that a platform might give, for example, a tracking or analysis of performance. So that's it for me today. These are my references, and thank you very much. You're free to ask any question anytime. Here's my email as well as my LinkedIn profile. Thank you very much.